Miles Harrington is the guy law enforcement calls when the story doesn't add up. In 1994 Anchorage, a plane crash is blamed on weather until the wreckage and the snow suggest someone staged the scene. With nothing but 90s grit, paper trails, and instinct, Miles goes hunting for the hands behind the storm. The Anchorage Run. A story by 10 Chapters Studio. Chapter 1. White Noise. Anchorage in February looked clean from a distance, like the world had decided to start over. Up close, it was exhaust in the snow, coffee gone cold on dashboards, and wind that peeled at the seams of your coat as if it had questions. Detective Sergeant Ruth Halverson met Miles Harrington outside the Anchorage Police Department with a face that said she hadn't slept since the news broke. She was early 40s, practical boots, practical eyes, the kind of cop who didn't waste words because words didn't arrest anyone. "You're the guy who sees the second story," she said, guiding him through the revolving door. Miles didn't correct her. He didn't do the modesty dance anymore. Reputation wasn't pride. It was a tool people used to pry open locked doors. "I see what people try to hide," he said. Halverson moved fast. A staircase, a corridor that smelled like copy toner and damp wool, a cramped briefing room with a map of Alaska pinned to cork, red string stretching from Anchorage to a black dot far northeast. "Small plane," she said. "Went down yesterday afternoon. Official line, weather, icing, pilot error, tragic." Miles watched her mouth tighten on the word tragic like it didn't fit. "But you didn't call me for tragic," he said. "We didn't." She slid a manila folder across the table. Photos, grainy, snow, wreckage like snapped bones, a wing half buried, a tail number smeared a soot. Miles studied the plane as if it could talk. A twin-engined, older, hard-working, the kind of aircraft that didn't crash unless something persuaded it. Halverson tapped the photo with a pen. "Beechcraft 58 Baron, charter run, pilot Eli Torgerson, passengers Glenn Mercer, CFO at North Star Petro Services, Lena Cho, State Environmental Regulator, and Mercer's aide Janet Rourke. North Star, oil money with cold hands." Halverson's voice lowered. "The crash site belongs to the troopers and the FAA, but Mercer's a city resident. Cho's testimony could have wrecked a lot of careers, and North Star's already lawyering up like this is a parking ticket. We've got politics leaning on us, we've got troopers who wanted simple, and we've got something that doesn't fit." Miles waited. Let her hang the thing she was afraid to name. Halverson flipped to another photo, a close-up of twisted metal. "That's the left engine cowling. You see the burn pattern?" Miles leaned in. The soot didn't look like the clean scorch of a hard impact. It looked fed, like the fire had eaten there longer than it should have been allowed. "Fuel-fed," Miles said. "Troopers say post-crash," she said, "but our guy at the scene," she hesitated like loyalty was a liability, "our guy says it smells like someone wanted it to look like post-crash." Miles turned the page, a shot of snow near wreckage, footprints, one set crisp, another trailing off toward the tree line. Halverson's knuckles went white on the folder. "We're supposed to believe nobody walked away, no survivors, except that's not what the snow says." Miles looked again. The prints weren't panicked. They were deliberate, spaced. Someone carrying weight, maybe, or someone trained not to run. "How soon after impact were those photos taken?" she said. "Within 2 hours, before the wind could erase them. Troopers say it's rescue traffic." Miles traced the path with his eyes. The prints didn't head toward the main wreckage. They angled away, like whoever made them was leaving after they'd done what they came to do. "Anything missing?" he asked. Halverson gave him a look that said she'd been waiting for that question.
Pilot's logbook, weather briefing printouts, and Mercer's briefcase. His aide swears he never went anywhere without it. Miles closed the folder gently. There was an art to touch, some cases bruised if you squeezed too hard. "Why me?" he asked. "You've got plenty of detectives." Halverson's eyes didn't flinch. "Because when people stage a scene, you don't fall in love with the scene. You go looking for the stagehands."
Miles stood. "Take me to the site." "Troopers won't love that," she said. "I'm not here to be loved," Miles said, and she almost smiled, like she'd forgotten she could. Outside, Anchorage held its breath. Miles felt it on his skin, the tension of a town that survived winter by agreeing not to panic. As they walked to Halverson's car, Miles noticed a uniformed officer by the doors, flipping a pager open and shut like it was a nervous habit. The officer looked up too fast when Miles passed, eyes narrowing, then away. Halverson didn't see it, or pretended not to. Miles filed it away. In the passenger seat, he watched the city slide by in grey and white, plows, neon diner signs, the low skull of the mountains beyond. Halverson drove like she was chasing something she couldn't name. "You ever been to Alaska?" she asked. "Once," Miles said. "Everything looked honest. That's what worried me." They reached the outskirts where the snow got quieter, where the world stopped pretending to be civilized and went back to teeth and cold. A trooper checkpoint waited ahead, blue lights, reflective vests, a man with a clipboard. Halverson slowed. Miles watched the trooper approach. And then the trooper leaned down, peered at Miles through the window, and said something that turned the air inside the car to ice. "Body count's wrong," he told Halverson. "We found 4, but we've got 5 sets of seatbelt buckles."
Chapter 2. The Buckle Problem.
The crash site was a wound cut into the snow. The helicopter dropped them at the edge of the perimeter, rotors whipping grit and ice into the air. Troopers in parkas moved like dark punctuation marks against the white. The mountains stood in the distance, indifferent and ancient. Miles walked slowly, letting the place speak. The wreckage lay scattered in a long, mean line, too long, too linear. Planes that hit hard tended to collapse into themselves. This had come apart like it had been persuaded to. Trooper Captain Avery Shaw met them with the kind of smile that didn't belong to the face wearing it. Shaw was broad, shaved head, eyes that never stopped measuring. "Detective Halverson," Shaw said. He didn't look at Miles at first, like ignoring him could make him vanish. Halverson introduced Miles anyway. Shaw's gaze landed on him and stayed there like a hand. "We're handling this," Shaw said. "You're handling the crash," Halverson replied. "We're handling the homicide angle." Shaw's jaw worked once. "There's no homicide." Miles stepped toward the wreckage without asking permission. It wasn't arrogance, it was momentum. Scenes disliked hesitation. It gave liars time to rearrange things. A trooper technician approached with an evidence bag. Inside were 5 metal buckles, each tagged with a number. "Beechcraft Baron seats 4, Halverson said. "Unless someone used the 5th harness," the tech said. "Some models have a lap belt in the rear baggage compartment, for cargo or for a person who doesn't want to be on the manifest." Miles crouched near a torn section of cabin wall. The insulation was charred, but the charring was uneven, heavy on one side, light on the other. He pulled a pen light from his coat and shone it along the metal. A faint, oily residue. Miles rubbed a gloved finger along it, brought it close. The smell hit him through wool and cold. Not just fuel, something sharper, industrial. What? Halverson watched.
Accelerant, not for burning wreckage, for controlling what the wreckage looks like.
Shaw overheard and drifted closer. "You telling me someone hauled accelerant out here in a storm?" Miles looked at him. "I'm telling you, someone didn't want this wreckage studied." Wind hissed through the trees, whispering like an audience. They moved toward the main fuselage section. A trooper had set up a canvas windbreak. Inside, evidence markers dotted the snow like tiny flags claiming territory. Miles spotted it before anyone pointed, a shallow depression near the cabin debris, as if something had been removed from the snow and carried away. Halverson saw where he was looking. Briefcase? Maybe. Or something bigger. A trooper photographer snapped pictures on a film camera, rewinding carefully. He watched the motion, small, precise. Everything here was analog, physical, accountable. No digital mercy, no undo button. He walked the debris field again, focusing not on what was present, but what was absent. No logbook, no weather printouts, no portable radio, no survival kit. He turned to Halverson. Pilot was experienced. 37, she said. Bush pilot, charter work, medvac sometimes. Locals liked him. Miles nodded. Experienced pilots didn't fly blind without backup, and they didn't lose their logbooks by accident. Logbooks were identity. He moved toward the footprints from the photos. The wind had softened them, but the shape remained. Heel, toe, heel, toe. The spacing was steady, not frantic. Miles followed them to where they disappeared into a stand of scrubby trees. There, beneath a dusting of fresh snow, he found a cigarette butt, new, not weathered. Brand, Marlboro Lights, still faintly smelling of smoke. Halverson frowned. Who smokes out here? Someone who needed to wait. He looked up. Beyond the trees, the land dipped toward a frozen creek. The footprints had been heading that way. Shaw's voice came from behind them. "You're reading too much." Miles didn't turn. "I'm reading what the snow wrote." Back at the perimeter, Shaw pulled Halverson aside, but Miles could still hear the edge in his words. "This becomes a circus. You'll regret it." Halverson didn't budge. "It's already a circus. You're just hoping the audience leaves." Miles stepped away and let them argue. He walked to the medics area, where body bags had been staged for extraction. A coroner's assistant held a clipboard, face pinched against the cold. Miles asked quietly, "Any anomalies in the bodies?" The assistant hesitated. "The pilot's hands," he said. "What about them?" "No frostbite, no defensive tearing, almost clean." Clean hands in a plane crash in Alaska didn't happen, not unless the hands hadn't touched the snow. Miles returned to Halverson as Shaw stalked away. "We need to talk to the pilot's circle, mechanic, dispatcher, anyone who had access." Halverson nodded. Then her pager chirped, sharp, insistent. She checked it. Her face changed. "What?" Miles asked. "It's from my desk," she said. "Someone faxed something to my office. No cover page." "From where?" Miles asked. Halverson shook her head. "Our machine doesn't log origin." Miles's eyes narrowed. "Then someone wanted you to see it now." They left the site under a sky the color of dirty wool. Anchorage swallowed them again, streets busy with people pretending the world was normal. Back at the precinct, Halverson led Miles to her desk. The fax lay there like a dead fish. One page. A weather chart. An old NOAA printout with isobars and pressure marks. But someone had circled a section in red pen and written 3 words in block letters. Not the storm. Miles stared at the chart. The circled area wasn't where the crash occurred. It was over Anchorage. And at the bottom, stamped faintly, almost like an accident, Anchorage Run, 2:17 a.m.
Chapter 3. The Tape in the Snow.
Miles didn't like messages. They were either begging or boasting, Either way, they meant someone was close enough to whisper. Halverson pulled the fax closer, studying the stamp. "Anchorage Run," she said. "That's not a weather term." "It's a route," Miles said, "or a habit." He asked for the precinct's fax room log anyway. Analog machines were liars, but people weren't always good at covering their tracks. The log showed routine transmissions, warrants, reports, nothing at 2:17 a.m., which meant the fax wasn't sent to them, it was sent from them. Miles met Halverson's eyes. "Someone used your machine overnight." Halverson swore under her breath and checked her keys. "Fax room's locked." "Locks aren't morality," Miles said. They went down the hallway. The fax room door had no damage, no pry marks. Halverson unlocked it and flicked the light on. The machine sat there, quiet, innocent, but on the floor near the trash bin, Miles saw what didn't belong. A crumpled sheet of paper with faint red ink. Someone had practiced the lettering. "Not the storm," written twice, then crossed out, then written again more carefully. Halverson picked it up, jaw checkering. Someone got comfortable. And familiar, because they knew where this room is, and they knew you'd check. They didn't say the obvious out loud. This wasn't an outsider. Later that day, Halverson drove Miles to Lake Hood, Anchorage's floatplane hub, a place that looked like the sky could drop in for coffee. Small aircraft lined the water like tired birds. Hangars squatted under heavy snow. The wind smelled of fuel and frozen lake. They found Eli Torgerson's hangar by the faded signage and the crooked lock on the side door. Inside, the air was cold and metal. A workbench held tools arranged with a mechanic's neat obsession: wrenches, torque gauges, a grease gun. On the wall, a calendar with a swimsuit model from last summer, now months irrelevant. Miles moved through the space slowly. Who maintained his plane? Halverson checked her notes. "Benji Coyle, independent mechanic. He's at Merrill Field most days."
Miles spotted something on the workbench, a yellow legal pad with a torn top sheet. The remaining page held scribbles, flight times, fuel loads, a few words. Run, 2:17, Noah, CHO. "Chose the regulator," Halverson said. Miles nodded, and someone associated her name with a run and a time. They found a corkboard with photos pinned. Eli with a group at a bar, Eli with a dog, Eli with a woman who looked tired but proud. "His wife?" Miles asked. "Marcy," Halverson said. "We have her address." Miles' gaze fell to the bottom corner of the corkboard. A small Polaroid was half hidden behind a receipt. Miles pulled it free. It showed a plane on the tarmac at night, tail number partially obscured by shadow. The photo was labeled in Eli's handwriting. "Second seat." Halverson frowned. "What does that mean?" Miles didn't answer yet. He heard something outside the hangar. Boots on snow, the crunch slow and deliberate. He looked through a dusty window and saw a man moving between hangars, shoulders hunched, head down. Not a worker. Too careful, too aware. Miles stepped toward the door, but the man was gone by the time he opened it. Only the wind remained, moving like it owned the place. They drove to Marcy Torgerson's house in a quiet neighborhood where the snow was shoveled but still looked heavy with secrets. Marcy opened the door wearing grief like a thick sweater, worn, stretched, impossible to take off. Miles introduced Halverson gently. Marcy's eyes flicked to him with a flash of suspicion. Outsiders were for tourists and trouble. Miles asked about Eli's last week. Marcy hesitated, then let them inside. The living room smelled of coffee and cold ashes. An answering machine sat on a side table, its red light blinking. Miles saw Marcy look at it and said, "I haven't listened. I can't." Miles's voice was calm. "May I?" Marcy swallowed, then nodded. Miles pressed play. A beep. Static. Then Eli's voice. Low, hurried, recorded over wind noise. "Mars, it's me. Don't freak out. I'm doing a run I shouldn't be doing. North Star money. They said it's just paperwork, but there's a fourth passenger, not on the manifest. And Lena Cho, she's not going to make it to that hearing if I don't do something."
A tape hissed. A second voice cut in. A man, close to the microphone, sharp. "That's enough, Eli." Then a sound like a struggle, the microphone scraping, Eli's breath turning desperate. And then the message ended. Miles stared at the machine, feeling the room tighten around them. Halverson's face went pale. "That's evidence." Marcy's hands trembled. "I didn't know." Miles rewound the tape carefully, like it was skin that could tear. He looked at Halverson. "We have a threat voice." "We need to run it," Halverson said. "In 1994, Miles said. "Not like TV, but we can compare. We can ask who sounds like that man." Marcy's eyes filled. "Eli said a fourth passenger." Miles nodded. "And we have 5 buckles." Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping the house once, then again, like someone making sure the address was correct. Miles watched the light slide away. He felt the hairs at the back of his neck lift. Someone was checking on what Marcy knew. He turned back to Halverson. "We're not the only ones listening," he said. And then Halverson's pager chirped again. 3 sharp beeps, the emergency code. She read the number, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "That's the photo lab, the 1-hour place Eli used." Miles' stomach went cold. "What about it?" Halverson stared at the pager like it was a curse. She said, "They found a roll from Eli's camera, and someone just came in asking for it by name." Chapter 4. 1-Hour Ghosts. The photo lab sat in a strip mall beside a video rental shop and a pizza place that smelled like grease and loneliness. The sign promised speed and memories. The inside delivered fluorescent light and racks of envelopes. Miles and Halverson arrived to find the clerk, teenage, acne, terrified, standing behind the counter with a cordless phone in his hand, talking to an officer. "That guy came in," the kid said, voice cracking. "Tall, baseball cap, said he was Eli's brother. He knew the envelope number. He said he needed the film for the funeral. He kept smiling like I was stupid." Halverson leaned in. "Did you give it to him?" The kid shook his head fast. "No, I told him it wasn't ready. He said he'd wait. Then he left, but he will come back." Miles asked, "When did Eli drop off the roll?" 2 nights before the crash," the kid said. "Late, like 10. Miles's eyes narrowed. 2 nights before. That meant Eli suspected trouble before he got in the plane. Halverson took the envelope with gloved hands. Inside were glossy prints, still warm from the machine. She spread them on the counter. The first shots were harmless. Hangar, plane, tail number. Then the angle changed. Night. A man's silhouette near the plane's wing, bending like he was checking something. Another shot, a close-up of a hand holding a fuel line. Another, a face turned slightly toward the camera, blurred, but the jawline sharp, the posture confident. Miles leaned closer. "He knew he was being photographed," Miles said softly. "That's why he turned. He wanted Eli to see him." The last photo made the air leave the room. It was a close-up of a laminated badge held up to the camera. The words were visible even in the grain. Anchorage Police Department. Halverson's face drained of color. Miles didn't react outwardly, but inside the case shifted shape. It wasn't just oil money and Alaska wilderness. It was home. It was their own hallways. Halverson snatched the photos, stuffed them into the envelope. "This stays between us," she said. Miles didn't argue. Sometimes secrecy was the only way to keep evidence alive. Back at the precinct, Halverson unlocked a small interview room and pinned the photos to the corkboard like a confession. She stared at the badge photo as if it were a snake. "You recognize him?" Miles asked. Halverson's jaw clenched. "Not from this. It's too blurry." Miles pointed at the badge. That badge could be stolen. "It could," she said, but her voice didn't believe it. Miles moved to the fax again, the NOAA chart. He studied the stamp. Anchorage Run, 2:17 a.m. He tapped the time. That's not when the crash happened. Halverson rubbed her forehead. "It's a signal." "Or a schedule," Miles said. He asked for a list of precinct employees who had access after hours, maintenance, night shift, records. Halverson got it, eyes flicking toward the hallway like she expected someone to walk in and accuse them of treason. Miles scanned the names and circled 3, a night supervisor, a records clerk, and an evidence tech who'd transferred in from another city last year. "Why those?" Halverson asked. "Because they have access and anonymity, and because if someone wants to move evidence, the evidence room is where they'd breathe easiest." Halverson didn't like it, but she nodded.
That night, Miles stood outside the precinct, collar up, hands in pockets, watching who came and went. He did it the old way. Eyes, patience, cold. No cameras he trusted, no shortcuts. At 2:11 a.m., a sedan pulled into the lot, not a patrol car. The driver killed the lights and sat for a moment, as if listening to the engine's last tick. At 2:16, the driver stepped out. Tall, baseball cap, hands gloved. Miles held his breath. The man walked toward the employee entrance, then paused, turned his head slightly, and looked straight toward where Miles stood in shadow. For 1 second, Miles felt seen, not spotted, recognized, like the man had expected him to be there. Then the man lifted a hand, not waving, not threatening, just acknowledging, and walked inside. Miles waited exactly 30 seconds, then moved, quiet, controlled. He followed to the door, but it was locked, and the man had already passed through. Miles turned away as footsteps approached behind him. A voice, calm, friendly, wrong, said, "Long night, Mr. Harrington." Miles turned. Captain Avery Shaw stood there in the snow, hands in his pockets, smile thin. "You're outside your jurisdiction," Shaw said. Miles met his eyes. "So are you," Miles replied. Shaw's smile deepened like a crack. "Alaska's a big place. Storms happen. Men die. You're here because a detective couldn't let it go." Miles didn't answer. Shaw stepped closer, close enough that Miles could smell cigarettes, Marlboro Lights. "You keep digging," Shaw said. "You'll end up finding what you deserve." Then Shaw walked past him and into the precinct, leaving footprints that looked very much like the ones in the snow at the crash site. Miles stared after him, mind snapping pieces into a new pattern. Shaw wasn't just warning him, he was setting him up.
Chapter 5. The Locker. Miles didn't accuse Captain Shaw. Accusations were fireworks, pretty, loud, and gone. What Miles needed was a rope, something you could pull tight while someone was still smiling. The next morning, Halverson met him with bloodshot eyes and a styrofoam cup of coffee that tasted like surrender. "You were right,"
Halverson said. "Someone used the fax room overnight again. Same time, 2:17. Miles didn't ask how she knew. The way she held herself said she'd been waiting in a hallway, listening to a machine breathe. "Any new message?" Miles asked. Halverson slid a paper across the table. Not a fax, handwritten, careful, printed letters. "Locker 117, Merrill Field." Miles looked up. "They want you to go alone." Halverson nodded. "Or they want us both to go and get killed." "Same difference," Miles said. They drove to Merrill Field in a grey drizzle that froze as it landed. Hangars stretched out like concrete coffins. The air smelled of jet fuel and cold metal. Locker 117 sat inside a row of rented storage compartments near the maintenance area. Halverson flashed her badge at the attendant, who shrugged like badges were just another kind of paper. They cut the lock and rolled up the metal door. Inside, a duffel bag, a cardboard box, and a stack of folded maps. Not tourist maps, flight charts, navigation sheets, the kind of paper pilots treated like scripture. Miles opened the duffel bag. A handheld aviation radio, spare batteries, a pager with the serial numbers scratched off, and a manila folder labeled in black marker, "Cho, hearing." Halverson's breath caught. She reached for the folder, hands shaking with anger. Miles stopped her with a look. "Photograph it," he said. "Then touch."
They did it the old way. Film camera, careful angles. Halverson opened the folder. Inside were photocopies, faxed documents, pages of reports, and a typed memo on North Star letterhead. Miles read the first line and felt the temperature of the room drop. It was a directive to delay Lena Cho's inspection findings, to manage her testimony, to contain the exposure. Below it, a handwritten note: "Run it or ruin it." Miles flipped another page. A list of numbers, payphone numbers, pager codes, a time stamped again and again. 2:17. Halverson pointed at one of the numbers. That's a precinct extension." Miles nodded. "Someone is using law enforcement as cover." Halverson's voice went sharp. "Or someone inside is doing it." Before Miles could answer, a sound came from outside. Tires crunching gravel too slowly. Miles stepped to the locker opening and peered out. A white panel van parked a few bays down. No markings. Engine running. The side door slid open. Two men stepped out in heavy coats. One held a cap low. The other carried something long wrapped in canvas. Miles didn't hesitate. "Out the back," he said. Halverson hissed, "There is no back." Miles grabbed the folded maps and shoved them into a box, then the duffel. He yanked Halverson by the sleeve as the men started walking. They moved down the row of lockers, boots loud on wet concrete. Miles's mind tracked options. No easy exits, too open, no cover. They ducked into the next bay, empty, and waited, pressed against cold metal.
The men's footsteps stopped near locker 117. A voice, low and amused, said, "They opened it." Another voice replied, "Then clean it." Miles leaned toward Halverson, whispering, "If they find us, don't run. Make noise. Get witnesses." Halverson's eyes were hard. "I'd rather shoot them." "Save that," Miles whispered. "Not yet." The locker door rattled. The men were inside, moving things. Canvas shifted, a thud, then silence. Miles waited until his lungs ached. He counted to 10 the way he counted heartbeats at crime scenes. When he finally looked, the men were gone, the van too, but locker 117 wasn't intact.
The maps were still there, some, because Miles had taken the ones that mattered. but the folder labeled CHO was missing. So was the memo. They'd left one thing behind, though. On the floor, a single photograph, glossy, fresh, dropped like a calling card. It showed Miles standing outside the precinct the night before, half-shadowed, collar up. On the back, written in the same careful print, "You don't belong here." Halvorson's jaw trembled with rage. "This is a threat." Miles stared at the photo and felt He pocketed the photo. "We go after the mechanic." "Benji Coyle?" Halvorson asked. Miles nodded. "Because Eli photographed someone near his plane, and because whoever is running this knows law enforcement routines and aviation." They drove straight to Benji Coyle's shop at Merrill Field. The bay door was half open. Inside, tools lay scattered like something had been interrupted mid-breath. A radio played softly, classic rock warbling through static. Miles stepped in. "Benji?" Halvorson called. No answer. Miles' eyes caught on the workbench. An answering machine, tape compartment open, empty. A smear on the floor near the back door, dark against the concrete. Not oil. Halvorson saw it too. Her voice went tight. "Oh no." Miles followed the smear to the back alley behind the hangar. There, half buried in slushy snow, was Benji Coyle's ball cap, crushed. And beside it, a fresh set of footprints leading away, steady, deliberate, heading toward the runway lights.
Chapter 6. The Man with Clean Hands. They found Benji Coyle alive. That was the first surprise. The second was where they found him. In an exam room at Providence, Alaska Medical Center, stitched up, bruised, and silent with fear. A uniformed officer stood outside the door. Not APD. Troopers. Captain Shaw's people. Halvorson flashed her badge and pushed in anyway. Benji lay on the bed like a man pretending he wasn't there. He looked mid-30s, grease under his nails that didn't wash out, eyes darting like he was watching invisible doors. Miles sat in the chair beside him. "Someone scared you," Miles said gently. His lips moved, but no sound came. Halvorson leaned forward. "Benji, we know Eli left a message. We know someone was near his plane. If you don't talk, you're next." Benji finally swallowed. "They said it was just a run. Anchorage Run, like it's a thing everyone does and nobody names." Miles watched him closely. "Who said that?" Benji's eyes flicked toward the door, toward the trooper outside. "I can't." Miles kept his voice calm. "You can. You just have to be specific." Benji's hands shook. "Eli came to me 2 nights before. He was spooked. Said North Star hired him, but he didn't like the passenger list. Said Lena Cho was on it, and she'd been getting threats." Halvorson's voice sharpened. "Threats from who?" Benji swallowed again. "He didn't say. He just said, if I fly her, I'm either saving her or killing her. He wanted me to check the de-ice boots, the fuel lines, everything." Miles asked, "And did you?" Benji nodded. "I did. Everything looked normal, but Eli said someone had access to his hangar, said he found a cigarette butt by the wing, Marlboro Lights." Miles felt the cigarette smell from Shaw's warning night press against his memory. "Then the next day, a guy came to my shop, not a pilot, not a mechanic, clean hands, too clean. He had a nice coat, city nice, and he asked me questions like he was checking if I'd talk." Halvorson's eyes narrowed. "What guy?" Benji hesitated. "I don't know his name." Miles asked, "Describe him."
Benji tried. Late 40s, calm, like he belonged everywhere. He carried a briefcase and talked like he was doing me a favor. Miles sat back, letting the description settle. He'd met men like that in every city.
Men who didn't sweat. Men who used calm as a weapon. Halverson asked, "Did he show a badge?" Benji nodded. He flashed something fast, looked official. Miles asked, "APD?" Benji's eyes widened slightly. "Could have been. I didn't look long." Halverson's pager chirped again, and she looked at it like it was another knife. "Chose hearing," she said to Miles quietly. "It's scheduled for next week." Miles nodded. Then the crash didn't end the story. It started it. When they left the hospital, the trooper outside watched them go, expression unreadable. Halverson muttered, "They're babysitting him." "They're controlling him," Miles replied.
Back at the precinct, Halverson pulled the staff access logs for the evidence room, fax room, and after-hours entry. Miles studied the pages, eyes scanning for patterns. At 2:14 a.m. on 2 nights, a single card entry appeared. Evidence Tech Graham Pike. Halverson frowned. Pike's new, transferred from Spokane. Miles tapped the name. New people are perfect. Nobody knows their habits yet. Halverson's voice hardened. "I'll bring him in." "Not yet," Miles said. "If he's involved, he'll lawyer up. If he's not, we burn an innocent." Halverson looked like she hated being reasonable. "So what?" "We follow," Miles said, quietly. That night, they followed Graham Pike from the precinct to a bar near Ship Creek, where the lights were dim and the music was too loud for honest conversation. Pike sat alone at the end, drinking whiskey like it was medicine. A man joined him, late 40s, nice coat, briefcase, clean hands. Miles felt his pulse tighten. The man leaned close to Pike and slid something across the table, an envelope. Pike didn't look inside, he just nodded and drank. Miles whispered, "That's our calm man." Halverson's eyes narrowed. "Who is he?" Miles didn't know yet, but he knew the type: corporate risk, government liaison, fixer. They watched the man stand and leave, briefcase swinging. He didn't stumble, he didn't hurry. He moved like someone who had never been told no. Miles and Halverson followed him out into the cold. He walked to a payphone, dropped coins and dialed. Miles couldn't hear the words, but he saw the posture, controlled, clipped, businesslike. Then the man hung up, glanced around, and for a moment his eyes landed on Miles across the street. A second of recognition again. He smiled. Then he walked away into the night. Halverson's voice was a razor. "He knows." Miles nodded. "Good," he said. "Now he'll make a mistake." And in the distance, somewhere in the precinct, a fax machine would wake up at 2:17 a.m. like a heartbeat.
Chapter 7. Evidence Room Winter. Miles didn't sleep much in Anchorage. The cold made the dark feel sharper, like the night had edges. He sat in a motel room with a legal pad and a rotary dial phone, connecting dots the old way, numbers, names, habits. Halverson called at 1:58 a.m. Pike just badged into the building, she said. Miles was already dressed. "I'm coming." The precinct at night was a different animal. Quiet hallways, fluorescent hum, the smell of stale coffee and old paper. Miles entered through a side door Halverson had propped open, unofficial, risky, necessary. Halverson waited in shadow near records, her face set. They watched the hallway clock tick, 2:10, 2:13. At 2:14, footsteps. Graham Pike appeared, walking with purpose toward the evidence room. He didn't look around like a nervous man. He looked around like a man checking a routine. He swiped his key card. The evidence room door clicked. Miles and Halverson moved fast and silent, stopping at the corner, listening. Inside, drawers shiding, the faint squeak of latex gloves, a quiet curse. Halverson mouthed, "Now?" Miles shook his head.
Let it happen. Catch the act, not the intention. Then a second set of footsteps approached. Miles's spine tightened. Captain Avery Shaw rounded the corner, hands in pockets, cigarette tucked behind his ear. He saw Miles and Halverson in the shadows and didn't even pretend surprise. "Of course," Shaw said softly. "You two can't help yourselves." Halverson stepped out. "Captain Shaw, why are you here?" Shaw smiled. "Because I'm tired of you dragging our state into your city paranoia." Miles watched Shaw's eyes. They were too calm, too entertained.
Shaw tapped his cigarette against his palm. "What's in there?" he asked, nodding to the evidence room. "Your big smoking gun." Halverson didn't answer. Her hand hovered near her holster. Shaw stepped closer, dropping his voice. "Let it go, Ruth. Oil money buys more than lawyers. It buys winters that never end." Miles spoke evenly. "You smoke Marlboro Lights," he said. Shaw's eyes flicked. Tiny movement. "So?" "So did the man at the crash site," Miles said, "and the man who warned me outside this building." Shaw's smile tightened. "Lots of men smoke. Not lots of men stand at a crash site hours after impact," Miles said. "Not lots of men leave deliberate footprints and vanish." Shaw leaned in, close enough that Halverson stiffened. "You think you're the smartest man in the snow," Shaw whispered to Miles, "but you don't know Alaska." Miles didn't blink. "No," he said, "I know people. Alaska's just the backdrop." The evidence room door opened suddenly. Graham Pike stepped out, eyes wide, carrying an evidence bag. Inside was a small object, a cassette tape. Halverson's voice snapped. "What is that?" Pike froze. Shaw's gaze turned to him, cold, commanding. Pike stammered, I was just—" Miles stepped forward, calm like a blade. "That tape," he said to Pike. "Where did you get it?" Pike's eyes darted to Shaw, then back to Miles. "It was logged wrong," Pike said quickly. "I was fixing it." Miles held out his hand. "Give it to me." Pike hesitated. Shaw spoke softly. "Don't." The word landed like a weight. Halverson's face hardened. "Captain, step back." Shaw smiled. "Or what?"
Halverson's hand came down on her weapon, not drawn, but ready. "Or I stop asking." For a second, the hallway held its breath. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum quieter. Then Pike's shoulders slumped. He shoved the tape toward Miles like he wanted it gone. Miles took it. The label on the cassette made his stomach tighten. E. Torgenson, Run. Miles looked up. Shaw's smile had vanished. "You don't want that tape heard." Shaw's voice went flat. "That tape never existed." Miles pocketed it. "It does now." Shaw stepped back, and for the first time, something like irritation cracked his calm. "You're playing with things you can't control." Miles's voice was steady. "That's what killers count on." Shaw turned and walked away, boots loud, the cigarette behind his ear untouched. Halverson stared after him, breathing hard. "Pike," she said, "you're coming with us." Pike shook his head violently. "I don't understand," he whispered. I'm not in on it. I'm the guy they use." Miles watched him. "Who used you?" he asked. Pike's eyes filled with panic. "The calm man," he whispered. "He said if I didn't move the tape, my wife would—" A fax machine whined to life somewhere down the hall. Halverson's face went pale. "It's starting." Miles felt the air change. "Where's the fax room?" he demanded. Halverson ran.
Miles followed, pounding footsteps echoing through the quiet precinct toward the machine that kept waking at 2:17 like a heartbeat that didn't belong to them. They burst into the fax room. The machine spit paper. Miles grabbed it as it printed. One line, typed, no signature. Play the tape and she dies. And below it, new this time, an address. Ship Creek Docks, 3 a.m. Halverson's voice shook with fury. It's a meet. Miles folded the paper carefully. It's a trap, he corrected. Then he looked at the clock. 2:18. They had 42 minutes.
Chapter 8. Ship Creek. Ship Creek at 3 a.m. was a place where the city's polite face cracked. Old warehouses, dark water moving under ice, the smell of fish and fuel and things that didn't want daylight. Miles and Halverson parked a block away and approached on foot, breath fogging, boots crunching. They didn't bring a squad, too many ears, too many hands that could be bought. Halverson whispered, "This is insane." Miles whispered back, "It's how you meet someone who thinks he owns the night." They reached the docks. A single floodlight buzzed overhead, flickering like it was uncertain about being brave. A man stood under it, late 40s, nice coat, briefcase, clean hands. He looked up as if he'd been expecting them exactly then. "Detective," he said to Halverson, pleasant as a banker, "and Mr. Harrington. I'm impressed." Halverson's voice was ice. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Cal Harker, North Star's risk manager. I handle unpleasantness." Miles's eyes stayed on him. Risk manager. The calm man had a title now. Harker nodded towards Miles's coat. "You have the tape." Miles didn't respond. Harker held up a palm. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to help you stop making mistakes." Halverson stepped forward. 4 people died. Harker's smile softened, rehearsed. "Tragedies happen in Alaska. Weather doesn't care about our feelings." Miles watched the briefcase, watched Harker's hands. Clean, but the briefcase was scuffed, worn at the edges like it traveled often. "You used our fax machine," Halverson said. Harker chuckled gently. "Detective, you're accusing a corporate employee of sneaking into a police building to send notes like a teenager." Miles spoke quietly. "If you're not the one sending the faxes, you know who is." Harker's eyes stayed calm. "Maybe," he said, "but I prefer to talk about what you can't prove." Halverson's hand moved towards her gun. "What do you want?"
Harker glanced at the dark water. "That tape is dangerous," he said, "not because it reveals truth, but because it invites assumptions. Play it and you'll point fingers, wrong fingers, and people get hurt." Miles asked, "Like Pike's wife?" A flicker, tiny, crossed Harker's face. "You're perceptive," he said. "That's why they called you." Halverson snapped. "They?" Harker spread his hands. "There are interests," he said gently, "bigger than your badge, bigger than Mr. Harrington's reputation." Miles stepped closer, voice low. "Eli said there was a 4th passenger." Harker's smile returned. "Eli said many things. Eli was too much." Halverson's voice rose. "Where is Mercer's briefcase?" Harker's calm eyes met hers. "You don't want what's in it. Trust me." Miles felt the wind cut through him. He could hear something else too, an engine idling, faint, nearby. He shifted slightly, scanning. A van, white, parked behind the warehouse, just visible. Harker followed his gaze and smiled. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "That's my ride. Anchorage can be rough at night." Miles's voice stayed even. "What's your offer?" Harker opened the briefcase slowly and pulled out a folder. Not CHO, something else. Photos, surveillance shots,
Miles standing outside the precinct, Miles entering Marcy Torgerson's home, Miles at the photo lab. "You're being documented," Harker said. "Your presence here can be framed. Your interference can be criminalized. You can become the story." Halverson's mouth tightened. "This is blackmail." Harker shrugged lightly. "Call it risk management." Miles held out his hand. "Give me the briefcase," he said. Harker laughed, soft and sincere, like he enjoyed the audacity. "No." Miles nodded once. "Then you're not here to help." Harker's smile sharpened. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "in my experience, men like you arrive in places assuming truth is a locked door and you're the key. But sometimes truth is a hole in the ice. You step on it and it swallows you." Behind them, a sound, a click.
Halverson turned too late. A man behind the floodlight, just outside the circle of light, had raised a pistol with a suppressor. Miles moved without thinking, grabbing Halverson's shoulder and yanking her down as the first shot snapped into the air like a broken twig. The bullet hit the dock post, splintering wood. Halverson rolled, drawing her gun. Miles dove behind a stack of crab pots, heart hammering. Harker didn't run. He stepped back calmly, as if violence was part of the meeting agenda. 2 more shots popped, dull and close. Halverson fired back, 3 quick rounds, loud, honest. The shooter stumbled, dropping behind barrels. Miles looked at Harker. Harker was smiling. Then Harker turned and walked toward the van, briefcase in hand, unhurried, as if bullets were just weather. Miles sprang up and chased, boots slipping on icy boards. He reached the van as the side door slid open. A hand grabbed Harker's briefcase from inside. Harker handed it over like a delivery. Miles lunged for it, and the van door slammed. The van roared forward, tires biting. Miles slammed his palm against the metal, watching it pull away into darkness. Halverson ran up, breathing hard. "Did you get a plate?" "No," said Miles, staring after the van. Then he looked down on the dock where Harker had stood. Something lay there, small, overlooked in chaos. A cassette tape. Miles picked it up and turned it over. Not Eli's. This one was labeled in neat block letters. "The Storm." Halverson's voice shook. "What is that?" Miles's eyes stayed fixed on the tape. "A story," he said, "and someone wants us to listen."
Chapter 9. The Film That Shouldn't Exist. Back in Halverson's office, the cassette labeled "The Storm" sat on the desk like a live animal. "No," Halverson said, "we don't play it." Miles nodded. "Not here," he agreed, "not on a precinct machine." They drove to a pawn shop on the edge of town, where an old cassette player sat in a glass case. Miles bought it with cash, no paperwork, no trail. Back at the motel, Miles put the tape in, pressed play. Static, wind, then a voice, calm, measured, familiar. Carl Harker. "The weather narrative is the anchor," Harker said, as if speaking to someone in a room. "We give them the storm, they stop looking for hands." A second voice replied, lower, rougher. "FAA will buy it?" Harker chuckled. "FAA buys paperwork. We supply paperwork." Miles and Halverson exchanged a look. Harker continued, "The wreckage was treated. The prints were planted. The logbook is contained. The tape is relocated. What they will see is what we allow them to see." Halverson's face tightened. "He's confessing." Miles held up a finger. "Not to murder," he said quietly, "to management. He's telling someone how to shape perception. That's still powerful." The second voice asked, "And Cho?" Harker's voice cooled. "Cho becomes weather," he said, "a name swallowed by a report." The tape clicked off.
Halverson stared at Miles. "We take this to the DA."
Miles shook his head. "They'll say it's hearsay," he said, "and then this tape disappears." Halvorson slammed her hand on the desk. "Then what?" Miles thought of Eli's photos, the badge, the fax machine waking at 2:17 like a pulse. "We need something physical," he said, "something that doesn't rely on sound."
Halvorson's eyes narrowed. Like what? Miles pulled out Eli's photos again. He studied the blurry face in the hangar shot. Then he thought of the 1-hour photo lab. "Film," he said. Halvorson blinked. "What? If someone is staging scenes, someone is documenting them. Not for memories, for control. Film can be evidence or leverage." Halvorson frowned. "So we go back to the photo lab?" Miles nodded. "And we ask the right question." At the lab, the clerk looked even more terrified than last time. Miles leaned on the counter, voice calm. "Has anyone else asked for Eli's pictures?" he asked. The kid swallowed. "A guy," he said, "2 days ago. Not the cap guy, another guy, calm. He said he was with North Star. He wanted every role Eli ever dropped off, like he was collecting him." Isles asked, "Did Eli have a customer account, a file?" The kid nodded, pointing to a cabinet. Miles's eyes swept the cabinet. "Any other names in there you recognize?" he asked. The kid hesitated, then pulled a folder halfway out and whispered, "This one. It came in the same week." The label read, "Merrifield, Night." Inside were envelopes, multiple rolls, same date range. Miles opened the first envelope and held the negatives up to the light. He saw shapes, hangar, plane, men moving. Halvorson's voice went tight. That's the dock." Miles's throat tightened. These photos were taken before their meeting at Ship Creek, days before. Someone had staged the stage. They paid and left quickly. In the car, Halvorson's hands shook. "This means they planned everything," she said.
Miles nodded, and they're confident. Back at the precinct, Miles didn't hand the film to evidence. He didn't trust the evidence room. He went straight to a friend of a friend, an old-school photographer with a darkroom in his basement who owed Halvorson a favor from an old case. By dawn, they had prints, clearer, sharper. One showed Captain Avery Shaw standing beside Cal Harker outside a hangar, talking closely, like co-workers. Another showed Shaw handing Harker something small, a key card. And then a third photo stopped Miles's heart for a second. It showed the Beechcraft Baron before the crash, on the tarmac at night, with a fourth figure climbing into the rear compartment. The figure's face was partially visible. Not Shaw, not Harker, someone else. Someone Miles had seen in passing and dismissed as background. A precinct uniform, a familiar posture. Halvorson stared at the face and whispered, That's Officer Dan Mercer." Miles's eyes narrowed. "Related to Glenn Mercer?" Halvorson's voice shook. "Brother." Miles felt the case tilt again, deeper, uglier. Dan Mercer had access, motive, and a badge that could open doors. But Miles didn't say it yet, not out loud, not until he could prove why. Because if Dan Mercer was the fourth passenger, then the crash wasn't just a murder. It was a decision made inside that plane. Miles picked up the photo and turned it over. On the back, written in the same block letters as the faxes, "Tomorrow, 2:17, last run." Miles looked at Halvorson. "They're doing it again," he said. And somewhere in Anchorage, a fax machine was already waking up.
Chapter 10. The Human Storm.
At 2:12 a.m.,
Halverson and Miles sat in an unmarked car outside Merrill Field, breath fogging, watching the hangars like they were waiting for something to crawl out. They didn't bring backup, not because they were brave, because they were cautious. Too many hands could be bought, too many radios could leak. Miles' eyes stayed on the hangar where Eli's Beechcraft had been kept. At 2:14, a figure moved near the side door. Officer Dan Mercer. Halverson's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "APD," she whispered. "He's one of ours." Miles's voice was steady. "He's also Glenn Mercer's brother," he said, "and he was the fourth passenger." Halverson swallowed. "Why would he be on that plane?" Miles didn't answer yet. He watched Dan Mercer unlock the door and slip inside. At 2:16, another figure arrived. Cal Harker. Nice coat, briefcase, clean hands. He walked like this was a meeting he'd attended 100 times. At 2:17, the hangar light flicked on.
Miles exhaled slowly. "That's the time," he said. "It's not a signal, it's a ritual." Halverson whispered, "We go in." Miles nodded. Quiet. They moved across the tarmac, wind biting. The hangar door was ajar. Inside, the air smelled of fuel and cold steel. They heard voices. Dan Mercer. "We don't need this." Harker, calm. "We do. Because you're emotional, Dan. You think this was about your brother." Dan's voice shook. "It was." Harker sighed like he was tired of teaching. "Your brother was compromised," he said. "Glenn Mercer started keeping copies, insurance, leverage. He threatened to hand Cho's file to the wrong people if Northstar didn't protect him." Halverson's breath hitched. Miles's eyes narrowed. Harker continued. "Lena Cho wasn't the target," he said. "She was the risk. Her hearing was the match. Your brother was gasoline, and you were the badge we could use to control the scene." Dan's voice cracked. "You told me she'd destroy him." "She would," Harker said simply, "and she would have destroyed others, bigger than him." Miles felt the pattern lock into place. The fourth passenger wasn't a victim. He was insurance, a badge in the cabin to manage outcomes, to remove the briefcase, to relocate tapes, to plant footprints, to make sure the storm story held. Dan Mercer had been used, and now he was being discarded. Halverson stepped in, gun drawn. "Dan," she said, voice sharp, "step away." Dan spun, eyes wide. "Ruth!" Harker turned slowly, not startled, as if he'd expected this ending too. He smiled. "Detective," he said. "Mr. Harrington, always the dramatic entrance." Miles kept his voice even. "You've been shaping weather," he said. Harker's smile stayed. "Weather is convenient," he replied. "In Alaska, it's believable." Miles stepped forward slightly. "You sabotaged the plane," Miles said, "not with an explosion, with something quieter." Harker's eyes glittered. "Do tell." Miles pointed toward the workbench where a set of de-ice boot parts lay. "De-ice boots don't fail all at once unless they're cut," Miles said, "and fuel fires don't burn that way unless they're fed. You treated the wreckage to obscure tool marks and accelerate burn." Harker shrugged lightly. "A theory." Miles nodded. "And you used the fax machine at 2:17 to keep cadence," he said, "because routines calm people. They stop thinking. Your storm story needed a heartbeat." Halverson's voice was tight. "Where's Glenn Mercer's briefcase?" Harker's faltered just a hair. "Destroyed," he said. Miles didn't believe him. He looked at Dan Mercer instead.
Dan, Miles said quietly, your brother kept copies. Dan's eyes widened. How do you know? Because Glenn Mercer was scared of North Star, and because he trusted you more than them. Dan's breath turned ragged. He said he had a second seat. He said if anything happened, I'd know where to look. Miles felt the words click into place. Eli's Polaroid, second seat. Miles pointed toward the Baron's old rear seating frame stored against the wall. That seat, Miles said, there's a compartment. Dan stared at it like a ghost. He hid it there. Harker's smile vanished. He moved, fast, suddenly not calm, toward Dan. Halverson fired a warning shot into the concrete. Stop! Harker froze, hands lifted, but his eyes were cold. You're making a mistake, he said. That briefcase will ruin lives. Miles's voice was flat. That's the point, he said. Dan moved toward the seat frame, trembling. He reached inside the compartment and pulled out a slim briefcase wrapped in plastic. Halverson's breath left her. There it is. Harker's face hardened. Dan, he said softly, you don't want to do this. Dan looked at him with something like hatred. You killed my brother. Harker's voice stayed calm, but now it was sharp. Your brother killed himself the moment he started collecting leverage. He just controlled the fall. Dan flinched like he'd been slapped. Miles stepped forward. You're not controlling this anymore, he told Harker. Harker's eyes flicked to Miles. You think you can win because you found a briefcase? He asked. Mr. Harrington, you're a man from the lower 48 playing in a place that swallows men whole. Miles didn't blink. I'm not here to win, he said. I'm here to finish. Harker's hand dipped toward his coat.
Halverson's gun tracked him instantly. Don't, she warned. Harker smiled, thin, bitter, and then he did something unexpected. He didn't go for a gun. He went for the briefcase. He lunged at Dan, grabbed the plastic-wrapped case and yanked. Dan stumbled, clinging. The briefcase tore free of the plastic and hit the floor with a heavy thud. The latches popped open. Papers spilled, photocopies, memos, checklists, and a thick stack of fax transmissions stamped 217, proof of the precinct machine being used. And one photo slid out and landed face up. A clear shot of Harker standing at the crash site, holding a fuel can, cigarette in his mouth. No weather, no ambiguity, just hands. Harker stared at it like it was betrayal. Miles stepped forward and picked it up calmly, showing it to Halverson. Halverson's face went still. That's enough, she said. Dan Mercer sank to his knees, shaking.
Harker's eyes flicked from Halverson's gun to Miles's face, searching for a crack, finding none. You don't understand what you're breaking, Harker said quietly. Miles's voice was colder than the Anchorage air. I understand exactly, he said. You hid behind storms because storms don't get arrested. Halverson stepped closer, cuffs ready. Cal Harker, you're under arrest. Harker smiled faintly, defeated but still proud. For what? He asked. Miles held up the photo. For being the human storm, he said. Harker's smile finally died. As Halverson cuffed him, the hangar lights hummed overhead, steady and unforgiving. Dan Mercer stared at the spilled papers, voice hollow. I thought I was saving him. Miles looked down at him, not unkind. You were saving the story they sold you, he said. That's different. Outside, the wind kept moving, indifferent as ever. But inside the hangar, the storm story was over. And at 2:17 a.m. the next night, the fax machine would stay silent, because the hands that fed it had finally been caught. End of chapter.
End of story. If you enjoyed listening, please support our channel and subscribe for more murder mysteries posted regularly.